Alright, prepare yourselves, because tonight we embark on a journey of legendary proportions, across continents, through deserts, and into the heart of ancient empires. We're going to dissect the life and legacy of a figure whose name still echoes through history with unparalleled force, Alexander the Great. Tonight, we ask the monumental question that has baffled historians, strategists, and admirers for millennia. Was he truly the greatest general in history? This isn't just a tale of battles and conquests. It's a deep dive into the mind of a tactical genius, the ambition of a king, and the profound impact of one man on the course of an entire civilization. We'll explore his upbringing, his revolutionary military strategies, his insatiable drive, and the world-changing consequences of his brief but utterly seismic reign. Before we plunge into the heart of ancient Macedon and the vast Persian Empire, take a moment to consider the scale of his ambition. Where are you tuning in from tonight? Are you nestled in a cozy modern home, with the freedom to explore history at your fingertips? Or are you simply seeking a moment of quiet reflection, far from the daily grind? Drop a comment below, and let me know your location and the time. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Your engagement truly helps us continue to unearth these monumental stories. Now, take a deep breath. Picture a world of city-states and nascent empires, of bronze and iron, of gods and legends. A world on the cusp of being irrevocably changed by a young, fiery king. The forging of a legend, early life, education, and the Macedonian machine. Alexander III of Macedon, famously known to history as Alexander the Great, entered the world in Pella, the bustling and strategically significant ancient capital of Macedon, in July 356 BC. His birth was not merely an event, but a confluence of auspicious omens and prophecies, tales woven into the very fabric of his destiny, befitting a figure destined for such an extraordinary, albeit tragically brief, life. His lineage was equally impactful and profoundly shaped his early existence. His father was Philip II, and figure of immense historical significance in his own right, arguably one of the most brilliant, pragmatic, and ruthlessly innovative military minds of his entire era. Philip was the architect who transformed Macedon from a fragmented, often warring, and somewhat marginalized kingdom on the northern periphery of the sophisticated Greek world into an undisputed dominant military and political power. On his mother's side was Olympias, a fiery, intensely devout, and politically ambitious princess hailing from Epirus, a region with a strong martial tradition. Olympias fiercely championed her supposed descent from Achilles, the legendary, almost divine hero of Homer's Iliad and the Trojan War, a narrative she impressed upon Alexander from his earliest years. Her fervent devotion to the tumultuous and ecstatic Dionysian mystery cults, often manifested in wild ritualistic ceremonies, further infusing Alexander's upbringing with a sense of divine favour and destiny. This dual parentage, a father who was a pragmatic, calculating, and often brutal warrior king of unparalleled military genius, and a mother who imbued him with a visceral sense of divine lineage, an almost mythical connection to heroes, and a volatile, passionate temperament, shaped Alexander's personality, ambition, worldview, and ultimately his fate from his earliest impressionable days. A prodigious upbringing under Philip II's all-encompassing shadow. Alexander's formative years were far from a sheltered childhood. They constituted a direct, intensive apprenticeship in the intricate and often ruthless realities of power, statecraft, politics, and above all, warfare. From a remarkably young age, Alexander was not merely exposed to, but actively immersed in, the complexities of court intrigue, the meticulous planning of military campaigns, the delicate dance of diplomacy, and the brutal necessities inherent in kingship within a volatile region. He possessed a keen intellect and an almost preternatural ability to absorb and synthesize information. He witnessed firsthand his father's strategic and tactical brilliance, Philip's unparalleled ability to unify disparate and often fractious Macedonian tribes under a single formidable banner, his masterful, often cunning diplomacy, which was invariably backed by the implicit or explicit threat of overwhelming military force, and most crucially, his revolutionary military reforms that fundamentally altered the landscape of ancient warfare. Philip was the visionary who created the formidable Macedonian phalanx, a groundbreaking infantry formation that revolutionized battlefield tactics. This phalanx was armed with the sarissa, an incredibly long pike, often reaching up to 18 feet, which when wielded in a tightly packed formation, presented an almost impenetrable wall of spear points, effectively rendering traditional Greek hoplite formations and their shorter spears obsolete. But Philip's innovations extended far beyond the phalanx. He meticulously refined cavalry tactics, transforming the aristocratic companion cavalry into a devastating offensive arm. He developed sophisticated siege warfare techniques, enabling his forces to breach previously impregnable fortresses, and he mastered logistics, ensuring his armies could operate efficiently over vast distances. He systematically transformed Macedon into the most efficient, disciplined, and terrifying fighting machine in the ancient world. Alexander absorbed these multifaceted lessons, not just intellectually, but viscerally, understanding the nuances of battlefield command, the critical importance of discipline, the psychological impact of aggressive maneuvering, and the precise mechanics of a truly professional and integrated army. He participated actively in military campaigns from an astonishingly young age, often on horseback, proving his raw courage, innate skill at arms, and natural leadership qualities under fire. It was during these intense, hands-on formative experiences that Alexander began to develop his own unique tactical instincts, learning how to command, inspire unwavering loyalty, and fight fiercely alongside the very soldiers who would one day follow him across continents, from the Aegean to the Indus. He forged bonds of comradeship that would last a lifetime, creating a deep mutual respect between himself and his veterans. Tutelage by Aristotle, the sculpting of a philosopher king's mind. Perhaps the single most celebrated and historically significant aspect of Alexander's youth was his intensive education under the legendary Greek philosopher Aristotle. From the tender age of 13 until he was 16, Alexander, along with a select group of young Macedonian nobles, many of whom would later become his closest companions, generals, and even rivals, received direct personalized tutelage from the greatest mind of the Greek world. Philip, with his characteristic foresight and understanding of the immense value of intellectual prowess for a future ruler, personally sought out Aristotle to educate his son, recognizing Alexander's exceptional intellect and vast future potential. Aristotle, a student of Plato and a polymath in his own right, immersed Alexander in an incredibly wide and rigorous range of subjects: deep philosophy, practical ethics, complex political theory, the art of rhetoric and persuasive speech, the immortal poetry of Homer, especially the Iliad, which Alexander famously carried with him throughout his campaigns, reportedly sleeping with a copy under his pillow, seeing Achilles as his spiritual ancestor, various branches of science, including biology, zoology, and botany, medicine, and geography. This truly unique and unparalleled education imbued Alexander with a profound and lasting appreciation for Greek culture, its intellectual achievements, and its ideals, even as he was preparing to conquer vast non-Greek lands. It fostered within him a razor-sharp analytical mind, a keen, almost insatiable, interest in the natural world and the diverse peoples populating it, and crucially, a desire not merely to conquer territories for plunder, but to understand, to organize, and, in his own ambitious way, to Hellenize, to spread Greek culture, language, and institutions throughout the immense lands he would eventually acquire. Aristotle taught him to observe meticulously, to categorize systematically, to reason logically, and to question critically, intellectual skills that would prove invaluable on the chaotic battlefield, in complex diplomatic negotiations, and in the challenging administration of a rapidly expanding empire. He learned to appreciate, or at least strategically understand, different cultures, and to perceive the world not just as a series of isolated hostile enemies, but as a complex, interconnected whole that could be reshaped by a singular vision. This philosophical and intellectual foundation would elevate Alexander far beyond the archetype of a mere warlord driven solely by conquest and plunder, providing him with a grander vision for something more enduring than just military victory. The volatility of succession and a fractured royal family. Despite his military genius and political acumen, Philip II was a notoriously complex, intensely ambitious, and often volatile figure, whose numerous political marriages and relentless machinations created deep and abiding instability within the royal family. This constant undercurrent of tension profoundly affected Alexander, shaping his understanding of loyalty, betrayal, and the inherent dangers of unchecked ambition. Olympias, Alexander's mother, was an incredibly fierce and possessive woman who deeply resented Philip's many other wives and mistresses, especially his marriage to Cleopatra Eurydice, a noble woman of pure Macedonian blood, who subsequently bore Philip a son, Caranus. This event immediately created a profound existential threat to Alexander's claim to the throne, as a pure-blooded Macedonian heir might be preferred over him. Olympias was Eperiote. This fueled a bitter, public and dangerous rivalry between mother and son against Philip, culminating in a violent quarrel during a wedding feast where Alexander openly defied his father, leading to him fleeing Macedon for a time, returning only after careful mediation. These tumultuous, often brutal family dynamics, while undoubtedly painful and psychologically scarring for Alexander, also served to harden him. They provided him with a harsh, visceral education in the cutthroat world of ancient power politics, teaching him invaluable lessons about the ever-present spectre of betrayal, the relentless nature of ambition, and the brutal realities of securing and maintaining kingship. It instilled in him a constant, hyper-vigilant awareness of threats, both external from rival kingdoms and internal from ambitious courtiers or disgruntled family members, and it sharpened his already formidable resolve to secure his own position, come what may. He learnt the harsh truth that power was never truly given. It had to be seized with unyielding force and defended with relentless vigilance, even against those bound by blood. Ascension to the throne, from heir apparent to absolute king at 20. The sudden and violent assassination of Philip II in 336 BC, under circumstances that remain a subject of intense historical debate and speculation, with various theories implicating Olympias, Alexander, Darius III of Persia, or disaffected Macedonian nobles, thrust Alexander onto the Macedonian throne at the incredibly young and perilous age of 20. This was an absolutely critical and dangerous juncture. Macedon, though recently transformed into a dominant military power, was still an inherently volatile kingdom, a realm where power transitions were often marked by bloodshed and instability. Rivals within the court, powerful and disgruntled nobles who might have felt slighted by Philip or saw an opportunity for their own advancement, and potentially even Alexander's own fiercely ambitious mother, Olympias, all sought to exploit the power vacuum created by Philip's death. Furthermore, many of the proud and fiercely independent Greek city-states, which Philip had only recently brought under Macedonian hegemony, a form of enforced leadership, saw this unexpected regicide as a golden opportunity to rebel and violently regain their cherished independence, threatening to unravel Philip's carefully constructed Pan-Hellenic League. Alexander reacted to this multifaceted crisis with a swiftness, decisiveness, and shocking ruthlessness that immediately and irrevocably established his absolute authority and quelled any burgeoning opposition. He quickly and systematically eliminated all potential rivals to the throne, consolidating his power with brutal and unhesitating efficiency, sending a chilling message to anyone who might question his legitimacy. Then, demonstrating both his unparalleled military prowess and his astute political acumen, he immediately marched south into Greece. When Thebes, one of the most historically powerful and defiant Greek city-states, bravely but perhaps foolishly rebelled, Alexander's response was swift, overwhelming, and utterly terrifying in its severity. He utterly destroyed the ancient city of Thebes, levelling its walls, razing its buildings, sparing only the temples and the house of the poet Pindar, and selling its entire surviving population into slavery. This brutal, unprecedented act, while horrific in its human cost, effectively and permanently quelled all further rebellion in Greece, securing his vital strategic base and confirming to all that a new, even more formidable, and utterly ruthless force now sat on the Macedonian throne. This decisive and terrifying display of power, so early in his reign, unequivocally proved that he was not merely his father's son, living in Philip's shadow, but a force to be reckoned with in his own right, a king capable of unparalleled swiftness and unwavering resolve. He inherited a powerful, professional, and loyal army, a secure political base in Macedon, and a clear, meticulously planned mandate to lead the combined Greek and Macedonian forces against the colossal Achaemenid Persian Empire, a grand project his father had painstakingly prepared for. The stage was now irrevocably set for a conquest of unprecedented scale and world-altering consequence. Your modern world allows young leaders to ascend to power through intricate political campaigns, often after years of careful maneuvering, public debate, and democratic elections. In Alexander's time, it was a sudden, violent, and utterly unforgiving transition, where intelligence, ruthless efficiency, and immediate decisive action were the only guarantees of survival and legitimate rule. He was not merely educated, he was forged in the relentless crucible of military innovation, profound philosophical thought, the cutthroat world of royal intrigue, and the ever-present threat of assassination. He inherited a remarkably formidable, well-trained army and a clear strategic mission, but the audacious, world-conquering execution would be entirely his own, driven by an ambition that defied all known limits. The Persian Colossus, and the dawn of an imperial dream, having swiftly and brutally crushed any lingering dissent in Greece, and unequivocally consolidated his absolute hold on the Macedonian throne, Alexander now fixed his gaze eastward towards the colossal, enigmatic, and seemingly impregnable Achaemenid Persian Empire. This was no mere kingdom to be conquered. It was the largest, wealthiest, and most powerful empire the world had ever witnessed, a monumental civilization that had for centuries dominated the known world, stretching majestically from the sun-drenched shores of the Aegean Sea in the west to the distant, mystical banks of the Indus River in the east. It encompassed dozens of diverse peoples, cultures, and languages, possessed untold reserves of wealth accumulated over generations, and commanded a military might that had for centuries dwarfed and intimidated any other power on earth. Philip II, Alexander's father, had meticulously and shrewdly laid the strategic groundwork for this monumental invasion, conceiving of it as both a long overdue punitive expedition for Persia's past, devastating invasions of Greece centuries earlier, and a unifying, galvanizing cause for the often fractious and fiercely independent Greek city-states. But it was Alexander, with his boundless ambition and unparalleled strategic vision, who would truly transform this ambitious, almost impossible plan into a living, breathing, and ultimately world-altering reality. The sheer scale of the Persian Empire, a civilization built on empires, to truly grasp the almost unimaginable audacity and suicidal courage inherent in Alexander's decision to invade the Persian Empire, one must first comprehend the sheer, mind-boggling scale and sophisticated complexity of his opponent. The Achaemenid Persian Empire, grandiosely founded by the legendary Cyrus the Great over 2 centuries prior, was not just a political entity, it was a multi-ethnic, multicultural, and remarkably enduring behemoth, a veritable civilization built upon the foundations of countless conquered kingdoms and peoples. Its resources were, to put it simply, immense. Vast and fertile agricultural lands that stretched for thousands of miles, yielding an unimaginable bounty of food. Rich mineral deposits that provided endless supplies of gold, silver, and precious metals. Bustling, intricately managed trade routes that crisscross continents, linking east and west, and a seemingly inexhaustible supply of diverse manpower drawn from its myriad subject populations. It boasted an incredibly sophisticated and efficient bureaucracy, a meticulously organized administrative system, an intricate network of well-maintained roads, most famously the Royal Road, which facilitated rapid communication and movement of troops across thousands of miles, and a sprawling treasury overflowing with tribute meticulously collected from its many satrapies provinces. Its military, while often deceptively portrayed as a disorganized, undisciplined horde by later Greek propagandists seeking to glorify Alexander's victories, was in reality vast, formidable, and remarkably multifaceted, including highly trained elite units like the legendary Immortals, a standing force of 10,000 elite infantry, powerful and diverse cavalry contingents, many from the fierce nomadic tribes of the eastern steppes, and numerous well-equipped contingents drawn from its numerous subject peoples, each fighting in their own traditional style. Conquering such an empire was not merely a military challenge of unprecedented scale, it was an audacious attempt to dismantle a deeply entrenched, highly organized and culturally complex civilization that had existed for generations. For the various Greek city-states, Persia represented the ultimate other, the archetypal Oriental despot, a symbol of vast threatening power, and its decisive defeat represented the ultimate symbolic and practical triumph of Hellenic civilization, its ideals of freedom, and its martial prowess. The crossing of the Hellespont, 334 BC. A point of no return, a sacred oath. In the crisp, hopeful air of the spring of 334 BC, Alexander, at the head of a meticulously trained and highly motivated army, estimated at approximately 48,000 highly disciplined foot soldiers, predominantly the fearsome Macedonian phalanx, and around 6,000 elite cavalry, including his renowned companion cavalry, initiated the monumental crossing of the Hellespont, the narrow strait now known as the Dardanelles, from Europe into Asia Minor. This was far more than a simple military logistical maneuver. It was a moment profoundly pregnant with symbolism, immense strategic risk, and an unshakable psychological commitment. Alexander himself, with characteristic flair for dramatic and impactful gestures, performed a ritualistic sacrifice at the legendary tomb of Achilles, his claimed ancestor and the quintessential hero of the Trojan War, signifying his profound intent to avenge the devastating Persian invasions of Greece centuries earlier and to conquer the very lands that had once threatened his homeland. By deliberately landing his forces deep in Asia, Alexander symbolically burned his bridges, effectively cutting off any easy or conventional path of retreat, and committing his entire force, his entire future, to the daunting and existential task that lay ahead. His army was not exclusively Macedonian. It was a carefully constructed, formidable pan-Hellenic force, including significant contingents from various Greek city-states, a testament to Philip's, and now Alexander's, unparalleled ability to forge a unified Greek-Macedonian expedition, albeit one unequivocally under Macedonian command. The immediate and crucial objective was to swiftly secure the strategically vital Asia Minor region, and perhaps even more critically, to dismantle and neutralize the formidable Persian naval power, which posed an existential threat to his extended supply lines, stretching back to Greece, and could potentially cut off his communications and reinforcements. The Battle of the Granicus River, 334 BC. A daring, decisive opening strike. Alexander's first major and truly decisive engagement against the Persian forces came swiftly, just weeks after his landing, at the Granicus River. The combined Persian forces in Asia Minor, led by a coalition of local satraps, provincial governors, and a significant contingent of experienced Greek mercenaries, often considered the best heavy infantry of their time, had strategically positioned themselves on the high, steep, and strongly defensible bank of the river. This offered them a clear advantage in a pitched battle, providing an ideal defensive posture. Alexander, however, demonstrating his characteristic daring, aggressive tactical genius, and almost audacious willingness to take immense personal risks, launched a direct, seemingly reckless frontal assault straight across the river. He personally led the thunderous charge with his elite companion cavalry, plunging into the treacherous waters and engaging the enemy at close quarters, famously taking immense personal risks and narrowly escaping death in the thick of the fighting. This audacious and unexpected maneuver utterly caught the Persian commanders off guard, disorienting their defensive plans. While the incredibly disciplined Macedonian phalanx engaged the massed Persian infantry in a brutal, grinding struggle along the riverbank, Alexander's cavalry, exploiting moments of disarray and weakness, broke through the Persian lines, outflanked their positions, and decisively routed their own, less disciplined cavalry. The Greek mercenaries fighting for Persia, left isolated and exposed without cavalry support, were then systematically and mercilessly annihilated by the Macedonians, a harsh warning against fighting for the enemy. The Battle of the Granicus was a stunning, resounding victory that served multiple crucial strategic and psychological purposes. It shattered the long-held myth of Persian invincibility on their own soil, irrevocably opened the strategic road to the vast and rich interior of Asia Minor, eliminated a significant portion of the Persian command structure in the region, and most crucially, unequivocally demonstrated Alexander's unparalleled personal courage, aggressive leadership, and brilliant tactical acumen to his own loyal troops. It was a psychological triumph as much as it was a military one, confirming the loyalty of his men and striking fear into the hearts of his enemies. Consolidation of Asia Minor and the legend of the Gordian Knot, 333 BC. Following the decisive victory at Granicus, Alexander embarked on a rapid, methodical, and brilliantly executed campaign to consolidate his control over the entirety of Asia Minor. He generally treated the local Greek and non-Greek populations with remarkable favour and leniency, often replacing corrupt or oppressive Persian satraps with his own carefully chosen Macedonian governors, or shrewdly empowering sympathetic local rulers, thereby presenting himself as a liberator rather than merely another foreign conqueror. He meticulously dismantled the existing Persian administrative structure in the region, and, perhaps most importantly, systematically secured all the vital coastal cities and strategic ports along the Aegean and Mediterranean shores. This calculated move effectively neutralized the formidable Persian navy, which largely relied on the naval contingents and resources provided by these now conquered coastal regions. His relentless march south brought him to the ancient Phrygian city of Gordium, a place steeped in local legend where he famously confronted the legendary Gordian Knot. According to an ancient prophecy, whoever possessed the ingenuity or divine favour to untie the impossibly complex, intricately woven knot would be destined to rule all of Asia. Instead of painstakingly attempting to untangle its myriad complexities, Alexander famously drew his sword with characteristic impatience and a flair for the dramatic, and simply cut the knot with a single decisive stroke, boldly proclaiming, "It makes no difference how they are loosed," or "I have loosed it." This decisive, practical, and undeniably arrogant act perfectly encapsulated his audacious character, a fundamental willingness to defy conventional wisdom, a clear preference for direct, swift action over convoluted problem-solving, and an unshakable, almost divine confidence in his own destiny and abilities. It served as a powerful and enduring symbol of his unconventional approach to seemingly insurmountable problems, and his belief that he was destined for universal dominion. The Battle of Issus, 333 BC, facing Darius III himself, in a game-changing encounter. The next truly monumental confrontation brought Alexander face to face with the very embodiment of Persian power, the great king of Persia himself, Darius III. Darius, immensely confident in the overwhelming numerical superiority of his vast imperial army, which vastly outnumbered Alexander's forces, perhaps by a factor of 2-1 or even more, had meticulously moved his forces to cut off Alexander's advance, positioning himself in a narrow coastal plain near the town of Issus. This location, however, inadvertently played directly into Alexander's strengths and negated Persia's overwhelming numerical advantage, as the confined terrain restricted the deployment of Darius's massive army. Alexander, despite being significantly outnumbered, launched a brilliantly conceived and executed flanking maneuver, a masterpiece of combined arms tactics. He personally led the thunderous charge of his elite companion cavalry on a decisive, concentrated assault against Darius's left flank, aiming directly for the Persian command elements, while the unyielding Macedonian phalanx held the vital centre, absorbing the shock of the Persian main line. Darius, witnessing his elite personal bodyguard crumble before Alexander's relentless charge, and fearing imminent capture, famously and ignominiously fled the battlefield in his chariot, abandoning his entire army, his personal standard, and tragically, his own family, including his mother, wife, and children, to be captured by Alexander. The leaderless and utterly demoralized Persian army, deprived of its supreme commander and its moral cohesion, dissolved into a chaotic, desperate rout. Issus was not just a victory of immense military significance, It was a psychological blow of utterly catastrophic proportions to the Persian Empire. It unequivocally demonstrated Alexander's tactical superiority, his unparalleled ability to lead decisive cavalry charges at critical moments, and crucially, the surprising vulnerability of even the great king himself. It also provided Alexander with an immense amount of captured treasure, vital supplies, and, perhaps most strategically important, Darius's captured royal family. Alexander, with remarkable foresight and political genius, treated Darius's family with extraordinary respect, honor, and clemency, thereby earning him immense admiration from across the ancient world and generating invaluable propaganda value against Darius's own perceived cowardice. The road to the very heart of the Persian Empire, its administrative centers, and its legendary wealth was now wide open, laid bare for Alexander's relentless advance. The Persian colossus, though still immense in its geographical reach, was now undeniably bleeding, its morale shattered, and its ultimate fate increasingly sealed. Your modern world sends armies equipped with precision technology, vast logistical support networks, and satellite intelligence. Alexander, by contrast, launched his monumental invasion with the sheer, unyielding force of will, unparalleled tactical genius, and the unshakable loyalty and discipline of his meticulously honed Macedonian military machine, daring to challenge an empire that had dominated the known world for centuries. He was proving himself not just a king and a brilliant general, but a conqueror with an unshakable, almost divine vision for universal dominion. His legend was growing with every audacious victory. What aspect of Alexander's early campaigns and victories against the Persian Empire do you find most astonishing? Is it his personal courage on the battlefield, his innovative tactical genius that repeatedly overcame numerical disadvantage, or the sheer audacity of taking on such a massive and long-established foe with a relatively smaller, albeit highly professional army? Share your thoughts below. The long march south, Egypt, Tyre, and the God King's revelation. Having shattered the Persian myth of invincibility at Issus, and sent Darius III fleeing, Alexander did not immediately pursue the great king into the heart of his empire, instead demonstrating a profound strategic foresight that went beyond mere battlefield victories. He turned south. His objective was clear: to secure the entire Mediterranean coastline, neutralize the formidable Persian fleet, which still drew its strength from Phoenician and Egyptian ports, and cut off Darius from his crucial maritime resources and lines of communication. This was not a direct path to conquest, but a methodical dismantling of the Persian war machine, piece by painful piece. This phase of his campaign would test his strategic patience, his siegecraft, and ultimately his very identity. The Siege of Tyre, 332 BC, a monumental challenge of will and engineering. The ancient Phoenician city of Tyre stood as a defiant symbol of Persian naval power and regional independence. Unlike other cities, Tyre was an island fortress, lying about half a mile off the coast, protected by massive walls up to 150 feet high, and a formidable navy. Its strategic location made it impossible for Alexander to bypass if he wanted to truly neutralize Persian sea power. The Tyrians, confident in their impregnable position and supplied by their powerful fleet, scornfully rejected Alexander's demand for surrender. What followed was one of the most remarkable and brutal sieges in ancient history, lasting 7 arduous months. Alexander, lacking a fleet, decided on a seemingly impossible feat of engineering to build a massive causeway, a mole, extending from the mainland to the island city. His engineers, labourers and soldiers worked relentlessly, under constant harassment from Tyrian archers and ships. They faced storms, Tyrian naval attacks, including fireships, and fierce resistance. When the initial mole was damaged, Alexander famously pushed it through the deeper waters, creating a larger, more fortified structure. He then acquired a Macedonian and allied fleet, using it to counter the Tyrian navy and bring siege engines to the very walls of the island. After countless assaults and immense casualties on both sides, the city finally fell. Alexander's retribution was brutal. Nearly all the men of military age were slaughtered, estimated around 8,000, and some 30,000 women and children were sold into slavery. This horrific act served as a chilling warning to any other city contemplating prolonged resistance. The Siege of Tyre, more than any other battle, showcased Alexander's unyielding determination, his tactical flexibility, his incredible engineering prowess, and his ruthless, unforgiving nature when defied. It secured his flank, gave him naval supremacy, and cemented his reputation as a conqueror who would stop at nothing. The conquest of Egypt, 332-331 BC. A bloodless triumph and a divine proclamation. From Tyre, Alexander continued his march south to Egypt, a wealthy and ancient land that had been under often resented Persian rule for nearly 2 centuries. Unlike the bloody struggle at Tyre, Alexander's entry into Egypt was a near bloodless triumph. The Egyptians, weary of Persian oppression and taxation, largely welcomed him as a liberator. The Persian satrap of Egypt, Mazaces, offered little resistance, seemingly more concerned with preserving his own life and position. Alexander wasted no time in establishing his authority and showing respect for Egyptian customs and religion. He famously travelled to the ancient capital of Memphis, where he performed sacrifices to the Egyptian gods and was crowned pharaoh, adopting the traditional pharaonic titles and rituals. This shrewd political move legitimized his rule in the eyes of the Egyptians, presenting him not as a foreign conqueror, but as the rightful successor to the pharaohs, restoring their ancient traditions. This garnered him immense loyalty and ensured stability in this vital province. The Oracle of Siwa and the Divine Sonship. While in Egypt, Alexander embarked on a perilous journey across the desolate Libyan desert to visit the famous Oracle of Amun at Siwa Oasis, a site of immense religious significance in the ancient world. The exact words exchanged between Alexander and the high priest of Amun remain shrouded in mystery and legend. However, it is widely believed and reported by ancient historians that the oracle confirmed Alexander's divine parentage, proclaiming him the son of Amun, whom the Greeks equated with Zeus. This wasn't merely a personal spiritual revelation, it was a profound political and psychological one. For Alexander, it reaffirmed his deeply held belief in his own destiny and unique connection to the gods, providing him with immense personal validation and confidence. For his troops and the wider world, it added another layer of legitimacy and awe to his rapidly growing legend. He was no longer just a king, but a god king, a divine ruler destined for greatness, further inspiring loyalty among his Macedonian and Greek soldiers, and awe among the conquered peoples. This act solidified his image as a truly extraordinary figure, transcending mortal bounds. The founding of Alexandria, 331 BC. A blueprint for a Hellenistic future. Before leaving Egypt, Alexander personally supervised the founding of the city of Alexandria, strategically located on the Mediterranean coast, near the westernmost mouth of the Nile. This was not merely a military outpost, but a visionary act of urban planning, designed by his chief architect Dinocrates of Rhodes. Alexandria was laid out on a grid plan, with broad avenues, a magnificent harbour, and grand public buildings. It was intended to be a major commercial hub, a bridge between East and West, and a centre of Hellenistic culture, learning and trade. The city quickly flourished, attracting scholars, merchants, and diverse populations. It would eventually house the legendary Library of Alexandria and the Pharos Lighthouse, becoming one of the most magnificent and influential cities of the ancient world for centuries. The founding of Alexandria, and many other Alexandrias throughout his empire, demonstrated Alexander's long-term vision, not just to conquer, but to build, to integrate, and to spread Hellenic culture and commerce, creating a lasting legacy beyond military might. It showed his ambition extended to shaping the future, not just dominating the present. With his southern flank secured, his naval threat neutralized, and his divine status affirmed, Alexander was now ready to turn his attention back to the true heart of the Persian Empire. He had established a secure logistical base in Egypt, and gained immense psychological advantages. The confrontation with Darius III, who had been rebuilding his forces in the east, was now inevitable, and would determine the fate of the world. Alexander's relentless strategic focus, his willingness to commit to long, arduous sieges, and his brilliant political acumen in Egypt were proving that his genius extended far beyond just battlefield tactics. He was building an empire, not just conquering territories. Your world relies on global trade routes and strategic alliances. Alexander systematically dismantled his enemy's logistical network and forged a new unified cultural and economic hub, all while solidifying his image as a divine leader. He was thinking beyond the next battle, planning for a new world order under his dominion. What do you find most impressive about Alexander's campaign in the Levant and Egypt? Is it the sheer engineering feat of the Siege of Tyre, his shrewd political and religious maneuvering in Egypt, or the visionary founding of Alexandria? Share your insights below. Having secured his western and southern flanks, and consolidated his power in Egypt, Alexander was now prepared for the ultimate confrontation. Darius III, humiliated by his previous defeats at Granicus and Issus, had not been idle. He had meticulously assembled an army of truly unprecedented size, drawing upon the vast manpower of his eastern satrapies, incorporating new tactics, and even deploying terrifying war elephants. This was to be the decisive battle, fought on a vast open plain near the village of Gaugamela in modern-day Iraq, a terrain specifically chosen by Darius to allow his overwhelming numbers and scythed chariots to operate effectively. The fate of the Achaemenid Persian Empire and Alexander's burgeoning dominion would be decided here. The Persian resurgence, Darius III's last gamble. After Issus, Darius III retreated eastward, determined to reclaim his honor and his empire. He gathered forces from the far reaches of his vast realm, Bactrians, Sogdians, Indians, Scythians, and more, creating a truly multinational army, far larger than any Alexander had yet faced. Ancient sources claim numbers wildly, but even conservative estimates place Darius's forces at several hundred thousand, dwarfing Alexander's approximately 47,000 men. Darius had also learned from his past mistakes. He chose the open plain of Gaugamela, near modern-day Mosul, precisely because its flat, expansive nature would allow his massive army to deploy fully, prevent Alexander's flanking maneuvers, and give his cavalry and terrifying scythed chariots maximum impact. He even ordered the ground level to ensure the chariots could charge unimpeded. This was Darius's ultimate all-or-nothing gamble, a meticulously planned battle designed to use his numerical superiority to crush Alexander once and for all. Alexander's preparations and the impossible battle plan. Alexander, aware of the immense size and readiness of Darius's army, took extraordinary precautions. He conducted extensive reconnaissance, carefully studying the terrain and the enemy's dispositions. His generals advised a night attack, hoping to surprise the Persians, but Alexander famously refused. He believed in fighting a fair fight, but also in the morale boost of a visible victory, famously stating, "I will not steal a victory." His plan for Gaugamela was a masterpiece of tactical ingenuity, designed to counter Persian numerical superiority and the threat of their chariots. He anticipated Darius's desire to envelop his smaller army, and prepared for it by deploying his lines at an oblique angle, creating a refused flank on his left to prevent being outflanked. He also created ingenious anti-chariot formations, lines of skirmishers and javelins designed to open up, funnel, and then impale the charging chariots. The centerpiece of his plan, however, was psychological and physical endurance. He knew he had to draw the Persian lines out, create gaps, and then strike at the heart of their formation. The Battle of Gaugamela, 331 BC. The hammer and anvil perfected. The battle began with Darius's scythed chariots charging Alexander's lines, only to be largely neutralized by the cunning anti-chariot tactics. Then Alexander began a slow, deliberate march to his right, an incredibly risky maneuver designed to draw the Persian left flank further and further out, creating a crucial gap in their center. Darius, desperate to prevent being outflanked, overextended his lines and ordered his cavalry to follow Alexander, which inadvertently created the very gap Alexander had anticipated in the Persian center. Seeing his moment, Alexander executed his secret weapon, a lightning-fast oblique charge with his companion cavalry and parts of the phalanx directly into this newly formed gap, aiming straight for Darius's position. This was the hammer blow. Simultaneously, the Macedonian phalanx and allied infantry held firm against the overwhelming Persian numbers, acting as the anvil. Darius, terrified and once again facing Alexander's personal charge directly, fled the battlefield for a second time, abandoning his army to its fate. The Persian collapse was swift and absolute. Despite a desperate counterattack on Alexander's left flank by Indian and Persian cavalry, which ravaged his camp but ultimately failed to break his line, the battle was decisively won. Gaugamela was Alexander's greatest tactical triumph, a textbook example of combined arms, feigned retreats, and decisive personal leadership. The fall of Babylon and Susa, the spoils of empire. After Gaugamela, the path to the heart of the Persian Empire lay open. Babylon, one of the greatest cities of the ancient world, renowned for its wealth and culture, surrendered without a fight. Alexander entered the city as a liberator, showing great respect for its traditions, repairing temples, and earning the loyalty of its populace. This was a pattern he would repeat. Where resistance was futile, he offered clemency and integration. From Babylon, he marched to Susa, another Persian capital, where he captured immense treasures, including the famous golden statue of Darius the Great, and countless riches that had been stored there for generations. The wealth captured at Susa was so vast, it reportedly took thousands of mules and camels to transport it, and it instantly ended the financial struggles of Macedon, ushering in an era of unprecedented prosperity for his army and his realm. These captures cemented his control over the administrative and economic centres of the empire, transforming him from a mere conqueror into the undisputed ruler of Asia. Persepolis, the avenging flame. Alexander's next destination was Persepolis, the ceremonial and spiritual heart of the Achaemenid Empire, the city from which Xerxes had launched his invasion of Greece a century and a half earlier. Unlike Babylon and Susa, Persepolis was taken by force. After securing the city's vast treasuries, Alexander ordered the magnificent royal palace of Persepolis burned to the ground. Ancient sources offer conflicting reasons for this act. Some claim it was a deliberate act of revenge for the Persian destruction of Athens' Acropolis during the Greco-Persian Wars, a symbolic end to the conflict. Others suggest it was a drunken act during a celebratory banquet, perhaps at the instigation of Thais, an Athenian courtesan. Regardless of the immediate trigger, the burning of Persepolis was a profound symbolic gesture. It marked the definitive end of the Achaemenid Empire, a clear signal that the old order was truly gone. It was a final fiery act of vengeance for the past, closing one chapter of history and opening another. Darius III, the Great King, was now a king without a kingdom. He fled eastward, pursued relentlessly by Alexander. The vast Achaemenid Empire, which had seemed an eternal and unmovable force, had crumbled under the relentless pressure of Alexander's strategic genius, his battlefield brilliance, and the unwavering discipline of his Macedonian army. Gaugamela was not just a battle, it was the decisive moment that reshaped the ancient world, proving Alexander's claim to be the new master of Asia. Your modern world has seen massive military operations, but few involve a general personally leading a charge into the heart of a million-man army. Alexander's tactical brilliance at Gaugamela, his personal bravery, and his subsequent strategic control over the captured Persian capitals truly set him apart. He had conquered an empire, but his ambition was far from sated. After Gaugamela, what do you think was the most significant impact of Alexander's victory? Was it the psychological blow to the Persian Empire, the vast wealth he acquired, or the symbolic burning of Persepolis? Share your thoughts below. The Endless East, pursuit of Darius and the road to India, with the heartland of the Persian Empire at his feet, and its ceremonial capital in flames, Alexander's next objective was clear: the relentless pursuit and capture of Darius III. The great king, now a fugitive, fled eastward, deeper into his vast domains, hoping to rally new armies and prolong the war. Alexander, however, would grant him no respite. This phase of the campaign would take Alexander and his weary army through some of the most remote and challenging terrains of the ancient world, through Media, Parthia, Hyrcania, and Bactria, pushing the limits of human endurance and logistics, and transforming the nature of his conquest from liberation to unyielding pursuit. The relentless pursuit of Darius III. After the catastrophic defeat at Gaugamela, Darius III fled first to Ecbatana, modern-day Hamadan, Iran, a summer capital of the Persian Empire, where he attempted to raise a new army from his eastern satrapies. Alexander, demonstrating his characteristic speed and determination, pursued him relentlessly. He forced his army on grueling forced marches, covering vast distances at an astonishing pace. This pursuit was not just about military victory, it was about legitimacy. As long as Darius lived, he remained the legitimate king of Persia, in the eyes of many, a symbol around which resistance could coalesce. Alexander needed Darius captured or dead to truly solidify his claim to the Achaemenid throne. The chase was long, arduous, and took Alexander into increasingly unfamiliar and hostile territories. Darius's betrayal and death. 330 BC. The new king of Asia. The relentless pursuit eventually led to a tragic and ironic end for Darius. As Alexander closed in, Darius was betrayed and murdered by his own satrap, Bessus, who was also his relative. Bessus, the satrap of Bactria, hoped to seize the Persian throne for himself and present Darius's death as a fait accompli to Alexander, perhaps hoping for leniency or a position in the new order. When Alexander's forces finally reached Darius, they found him dying or already dead, abandoned in a cart. Alexander, famously, reacted with a mix of grief and calculated anger. He covered Darius's body with his own cloak, expressing sorrow for his fallen rival, but also outrage at the treacherous manner of his death. He ordered a royal burial for Darius, treating him with the honour due to a king. This act, while possibly genuine, was also a shrewd political move. It positioned Alexander as the legitimate avenger of Darius, and the rightful successor to the Achaemenid throne, effectively making Bessus a usurper and a traitor in the eyes of both Macedonians and Persians. Alexander vowed to pursue and punish Bessus, which he did relentlessly for the next 3 years. Darius's death definitively ended the Achaemenid dynasty, leaving a power vacuum that Alexander was eager to fill. Campaigns in the eastern satrapies, guerrilla warfare and cultural fusion. With Darius dead, Alexander's focus shifted from conquering an empire to pacifying and integrating its vast eastern territories, the satrapies of Hyrcania, Parthia, Arachosia, Drangiana, Sogdia, and Bactria. These regions were fiercely independent, often inhabited by warlike nomadic tribes who employed effective guerrilla tactics, making conventional warfare difficult. This phase of the campaign, lasting several years, 330 to 327 BC, was perhaps Alexander's most challenging militarily. He faced constant skirmishes, ambushes, and protracted sieges of mountain strongholds, like the famous Sogdian Rock. His army, already exhausted, suffered heavy casualties in this brutal attritional warfare. To manage these vast territories and their diverse populations, Alexander adopted a policy of deliberate cultural fusion, known as Hellenization. He founded numerous new cities, more Alexandrias, which served as military outposts, administrative centers, and hubs for Greek culture and trade. He incorporated Iranian nobles into his administration, dressed in Persian attire, and introduced Persian court customs. He encouraged his soldiers to marry local women, famously orchestrating a mass marriage ceremony at Susa years later. This policy, while strategically brilliant for long-term integration, caused considerable resentment and unrest among his own Macedonian veterans, who viewed these Oriental customs as a betrayal of their Greek identity. The plots and purges, rising tensions within the Macedonian ranks. As Alexander embraced Persian customs and continued his relentless eastward march, tensions within his inner circle and the Macedonian army began to simmer and eventually boil over. His Macedonian veterans, increasingly weary of endless campaigning, saw his adoption of Persian dress, his insistence on proskynesis, the Persian act of prostration before the king, which Greeks viewed as worship appropriate only for gods, and his promotion of Persians to high office as an insult and a betrayal. This descent led to several conspiracies and purges that stained Alexander's reign. The most tragic was the execution of Parmenion, his trusted general and his father's old comrade, and Parmenion's son Philodas. Philodas, Alexander's commander of the companion cavalry and a man from a highly influential family, was implicated in a plot against Alexander's life and executed after torture. Alexander then sent agents to Ecbatana to assassinate Parmenion, fearing his potential for revolt. Later, in a drunken rage, Alexander personally killed Cleitus the Black, one of his closest friends and saviors at Granicus, after Cleitus publicly criticized Alexander's oriental ways and his diminishing regard for Macedonian veterans. These incidents highlight the growing schism between Alexander and his core Macedonian support, fueled by his ambition, his perceived arrogance, and his attempts at cultural integration. They reveal a darker, more volatile side of Alexander, prone to fits of rage and deeply suspicious of dissent. Crossing the Hindu Kush into the unknown. Having finally subdued the eastern satrapies, Alexander turned his attention to what he believed was the edge of the inhabited world, India. His desire to reach the ends of the earth and the outer ocean was both geographical and almost mythological. To reach India, his army had to cross the formidable Hindu Kush mountain range, a brutal, snow-capped barrier, often impassable, that presented immense logistical challenges. This crossing was one of the most physically demanding feats of his entire campaign, pushing his army to its absolute limits of cold, hunger, and exhaustion. Thousands of men and pack animals perished in the icy passes. Despite these incredible hardships, Alexander pressed on, his ambition undimmed. He entered the fertile plains of the Indus Valley, ready to confront new kingdoms and new challenges, believing himself to be on the verge of achieving unprecedented glory and exploring the very limits of the known world. This audacious leap into the geographical unknown underscored his insatiable curiosity and his relentless drive to conquer every land that lay before him, no matter the cost. Alexander's relentless pursuit of Darius, his difficult pacification of the eastern satrapies, and his march into India illustrate a leader driven not just by military victory, but by a complex mix of destiny, political consolidation, and a thirst for exploration. His increasing authoritarianism and cultural fusion, however, were beginning to alienate the very men who had brought him this far, setting the stage for future conflicts within his own ranks. The conquest was far from over, but the challenges were shifting from external enemies to internal tensions. Your modern world uses satellites and drones to map every corner of the Earth. Alexander plunged into vast, uncharted territories with a large army, facing hidden enemies and unimaginable natural barriers. Driven by a vision of universal dominion and a personal quest for glory, he was truly venturing into the unknown. What aspect of Alexander's push into the eastern satrapies and beyond do you find most compelling? Is it his relentless pursuit of Darius, his policy of Hellenization, or the increasing friction within his own army? Share your thoughts below. The clash in India, Porus, the mutiny, and the turn westward. Having finally breached the formidable Hindu Kush, Alexander and his weary army descended into the fertile, exotic, and largely unknown lands of India, specifically the region of Punjab, in modern-day Pakistan and India. This was a land of immense rivers, dense jungles, and powerful kingdoms ruled by formidable Rajas, who commanded armies unlike any Alexander had yet faced, including terrifying war elephants. His ambition to reach the ends of the earth was about to be put to its most grueling test, both on the battlefield and within the hearts of his own men. The Battle of the Hydaspes River, 326 BC. Confronting the elephants of Porus, Alexander's most significant engagement in India was against King Porus, the formidable ruler of the Pauravas, who commanded a powerful army that included a significant contingent of war elephants, terrifying, living tanks capable of wreaking havoc on infantry formations. Porus positioned his forces on the far bank of the Hydaspes River, modern-day Jhelum River, which was swollen by monsoon rains, making a direct crossing perilous. Alexander, demonstrating his characteristic tactical brilliance and deception, feigned multiple crossing attempts along the river, distracting Porus while secretly moving a significant portion of his army upstream under the cover of darkness and a thunderstorm. This allowed him to cross relatively unopposed. In the ensuing battle, Alexander's innovative tactics shone again. He knew his Macedonian phalanx would struggle against the elephants head-on. Instead, he employed a flexible battle line, utilizing his light infantry and archers to harass the elephants, driving them into disarray and causing them to turn on their own side. His cavalry, as always, was decisive, outflanking Porus's forces and attacking from the rear. Despite the initial shock and terror caused by the elephants, Alexander secured another brilliant, hard-fought victory. Porus, a towering figure who fought bravely until the very end, impressed Alexander immensely. In a famous exchange, when asked how he wished to be treated, Porus famously replied, "Treat me, Alexander, as a king." Alexander, recognizing a kindred spirit and a formidable adversary, not only restored Porus to his kingdom, but granted him additional territories, securing a loyal ally in the region. The Battle of the Hydaspes was a testament to Alexander's adaptability, his mastery of combined arms against novel threats, and his capacity for magnanimity, even towards a defeated foe. The limits of conquest. The mutiny at the Hyphasis River. After Hydaspes, Alexander's ambition drove him further eastward, towards the Gangetic Plains, where rumours spoke of even larger and more powerful kingdoms. His army, however, had reached its breaking point. They had been campaigning for nearly 8 years, marched thousands of miles, endured countless battles, faced unknown diseases, and suffered unimaginable hardships crossing deserts and mountains. They were exhausted, homesick, and terrified of facing more formidable armies and even larger elephants. At the Hyphasis River, modern-day Beis River, his Macedonian veterans, led by Cordus, one of his most respected generals, openly refused to march further. They had seen enough. They pleaded with Alexander to turn back, to return home to their families and the immense wealth they had accumulated. Alexander, initially furious and deeply disappointed, tried to persuade them, arguing for the glory of further conquests and the completion of his world-spanning vision. He withdrew to his tent for 3 days, sulking and refusing to see anyone, hoping their resolve would break, but the army held firm, recognizing that pushing them further would lead to outright rebellion and the destruction of his command. Alexander, for the first time in his career, relented. This was a profound moment, a limit to his absolute power, forcing him to accept that even a god-king could not command the impossible indefinitely. It marked the definitive end of his eastward expansion. The brutal march through the Gedrosian Desert, 325 BC, a near catastrophe. With the decision made to return, Alexander chose a different, almost suicidal route back to Persia, perhaps driven by a desire to explore, or to punish his army for their mutiny, or simply to find a more direct path. He divided his forces. The main body of the army, led by him, would march through the desolate and scorching Gedrosian Desert in modern-day Baluchistan, Pakistan, and Iran, while his admiral Narcus would lead the fleet along the coast, charting the unknown waters and resupplying the land force. The march through Gedrosia proved to be one of the most catastrophic episodes of Alexander's entire campaign. The desert was vast, water sources were scarce and often undrinkable, and the heat was unbearable. Thousands of soldiers, camp followers and pack animals perished from thirst, starvation, heat stroke and exhaustion. The army was ravaged, its morale plummeted, and its discipline frayed. Alexander, however, shared every hardship with his men, refusing water when his troops had none, reportedly inspiring them with his resilience. The Gedrosian March was a testament to his sheer physical endurance and his capacity to lead by example, even in the face of utter despair, but it was also a reckless, tragic error in judgment that cost him dearly in men and material. The fleet, under Nearchus, faced its own perils but eventually made it through, charting a crucial new sea route. Return to Persia, consolidating the empire and dealing with corruption. After the nightmare of Gedrosia, Alexander returned to the heart of his empire, entering Susa and Persepolis. He found that many of the satraps and officials he had appointed had grown corrupt, misused funds, and even raised private armies in his prolonged absence. Many governors, both Persian and Macedonian, were summarily executed for corruption, insubordination, or disloyalty. This brutal crackdown reasserted his absolute authority and sent a clear message that his empire would be governed with an iron fist. He also focused on integrating his empire, attempting to fuse Greek and Persian cultures. He held the mass marriages at Susa in 324 BC, where he and 80 of his leading officers married Persian noblewomen, and 10,000 Macedonian soldiers were encouraged to marry Persian women, offering them rich dowries. This policy, designed to create a lasting Greco-Persian ruling class, was deeply unpopular with his Macedonian veterans and many of his generals, who resented the forced integration and Alexander's perceived preference for Orientals. The death of Hephaestion and the growing paranoia. The last years of Alexander's life were marked by increasing isolation, bouts of heavy drinking, and growing paranoia. The death of his closest friend, companion, and presumed lover Hephaestion in Ecbatana in 324 BC devastated Alexander. His grief was reportedly immense and uncontrollable, leading to extravagant mourning rituals, the execution of the physician who failed to save Hephaestion, and even divine honours for his deceased friend. Hephaestion's death removed Alexander's most trusted confidant and emotional anchor, leaving him more isolated and perhaps more erratic. The constant campaigning, the immense responsibilities of empire, and the increasing friction with his Macedonian officers who resisted his Oriental policies all took their toll. Alexander had achieved unimaginable conquests, but the cost was increasingly visible in his own temperament and the loyalty of his inner circle. He was preparing new campaigns, possibly an invasion of Arabia, but the empire was a restless entity, and its master was a changed man. Alexander had conquered the known world from Greece to India, but the strains of empire and ceaseless ambition were beginning to show. He had faced his greatest external enemies and prevailed, but the internal challenges of managing a vast multi-ethnic empire and the growing dissent within his own ranks were proving to be a new, formidable kind of adversary. His unparalleled strategic and tactical genius remained, but the context of his leadership had irrevocably shifted. Your modern world faces challenges of integration and cultural differences on a global scale. Alexander attempted to forge a vast multi-ethnic empire with policies that were revolutionary for their time, but often met with deep-seated resistance from his own people. He was a force of nature who redefined the very concept of empire, but even he found the limits of human endurance and loyalty. What do you find most poignant or impactful about Alexander's final years, particularly his mutiny at the Hyphasis River, the Gedrosian March, or the death of Hephaestion? How do these events colour your perception of him as a general and a leader? Share your thoughts below. The end of an era, Alexander's death, legacy, and the fracturing of an empire. Alexander's return to Babylon in 323 BC marked a pivotal, yet tragically brief moment. He was at the undisputed zenith of his power, master of the largest empire the world had ever seen, stretching from Greece to India. He was still only 32 years old, with boundless ambition for further conquests, including plans for an Arabian campaign, and possibly even a circumnavigation of Africa. Yet his reign, so filled with astonishing triumphs, was about to reach its sudden and dramatic end. His death would plunge his newly forged empire into chaos, reshape the Hellenistic world for centuries, and forever cement his place as one of history's most compelling and controversial figures. The mysterious death in Babylon, 323 BC. In early June of 3023 BC, Alexander fell ill in Babylon after a prolonged drinking session and a lavish banquet. The nature of his illness has been a subject of intense historical debate for millennia. Ancient sources describe symptoms consistent with a high fever, severe abdominal pain, and progressive weakness, lasting for about 10 days. Theories for his death range widely. Malaria or typhoid fever. These are common diseases in the Mesopotamian marshlands, and his prolonged campaigns and exposure to various climates would have made him highly susceptible. Given the lack of medical understanding at the time, this is a plausible natural cause. Alcohol poisoning. Alexander was known for his heavy drinking, particularly in his later years, and a massive intake could have weakened his system or exacerbated an underlying condition. Poisoning. This remains a popular, albeit unproven, theory. Many individuals and factions had reasons to want Alexander dead. Disgruntled Macedonian generals weary of his orientalization and endless campaigns, ambitious rivals seeking power, or even, as some ancient rumors suggested, a delayed poison administered by Aristotle's family, who were supposedly offended by Alexander's execution of Callisthenes. While a compelling narrative, there is no definitive historical evidence to support this. Regardless of the cause, Alexander's death was sudden, unexpected, and left his empire without a clear successor. He reportedly whispered to the strongest, or to Craterus, depending on the source, when asked who should inherit his empire, a vague response that would unleash decades of brutal civil war. The Wars of the Diadochi, the empire fractures. Alexander's death triggered what became known as the Wars of the Diadochi, successors. With no obvious heir, his half-brother Philip III Aridaeus was mentally incapacitated, and his son Alexander IV was born posthumously. His most powerful generals, known as the Diadochi, immediately began to contend for control of his vast empire. These highly ambitious and capable men, including Ptolemy, who took Egypt, Seleucus, who took the vast eastern territories, forming the Seleucid Empire, Antigonus, who tried to claim the whole empire, Lysimachus, who took Thrace and Asia Minor, and Cassander, who eventually controlled Macedon and Greece, engaged in decades of brutal, shifting alliances and devastating warfare. The unity Alexander had forged through conquest quickly dissolved. While they paid lip service to the idea of a unified empire for a time, in reality, each general sought to carve out and consolidate his own dynastic kingdom. The Wars of the Diadochi ultimately led to the permanent fragmentation of Alexander's empire into several powerful Hellenistic kingdoms, each ruled by a dynasty founded by one of his generals. The Hellenistic Age, a lasting legacy of cultural fusion. Despite the political fragmentation, Alexander's conquests had a profound and lasting cultural impact, ushering in what historians call the Hellenistic Age, roughly 323 BC to 31 BC, with the Roman conquest of Egypt. This era was characterized by the widespread dissemination of Greek language. Koine Greek became the lingua franca. Art, architecture, philosophy, and political institutions across the vast former Persian Empire, reaching as far as India. Greek cities, the Alexandrias he founded and others, became centers of learning and trade, fostering new forms of art, literature, and scientific inquiry, e.g. the Library of Alexandria, the Pergamene altar. This was not a one-way street. Greek culture also absorbed Eastern influences, creating a rich synthesis. While Alexander's personal vision of a true Greco-Persian fusion might not have fully materialized in his lifetime, his conquests created the conditions for this vibrant, interconnected Hellenistic world that shaped the Mediterranean and Near East for centuries, bridging the gap between East and West in unprecedented ways. It was a period of great intellectual and artistic achievement, driven by the opportunities and challenges unleashed by Alexander's campaigns. Alexander's enduring military legacy. Alexander's military genius remains unparalleled in many respects. He revolutionized warfare through combined arms tactics, his masterful integration of the Macedonian phalanx, infantry, the companion cavalry, heavy cavalry, light cavalry, archers and siege engineers was unrivaled. He understood how each arm supported the others to achieve decisive results. Aggressive leadership, his personal courage, willingness to lead from the front, and his daring, often risky, battlefield decisions, like the charge at Issus or Gaugamela, inspired immense loyalty and fear in his enemies. Strategic vision. He thought on a grand scale, not just of individual battles, but of securing supply lines, neutralizing naval threats, choosing battlefields, and understanding the political implications of his military moves. Logistics and speed. His ability to move large armies vast distances, often at astonishing speed, was a logistical marvel for his time, continually catching his enemies off guard. Adaptability. He learned from his enemies, e.g. incorporating elephants and adapting tactics in India, and adjusted his strategies to different terrains and opponents. His campaigns became case studies for military leaders for centuries, from Hannibal and Caesar to Napoleon, all of whom studied his tactics and strategic brilliance. The myth and the man. Alexander in history and legend. Alexander the Great quickly transcended mortal bounds to become a legendary figure. Even in his own lifetime, his exploits were exaggerated, embellished, and woven into countless myths, spreading across continents and cultures. He was seen as a divine figure, a liberator, a conqueror, a philosopher king, and a tragic hero. His story inspired countless works of art, literature, and philosophy. Yet the man behind the myth remains complex and contradictory. A brilliant strategist capable of profound magnanimity and genuine intellectual curiosity, but also a ruthless, volatile, and increasingly paranoid tyrant, prone to fits of rage and excessive drinking. His ambition, while leading to unparalleled achievements, ultimately led him to alienate his closest companions and push his army beyond its limits. His legacy is not just one of military conquest, but of the dramatic intersection of individual will, strategic genius, cultural diffusion, and the profound, often chaotic consequences of empire. His life, though short, was so impactful that it forever altered the course of Western and Eastern history, marking a distinct shift from the classical Greek world to the vast, interconnected Hellenistic age. He was not just a general, he was a force of nature, a world changer whose influence continues to be debated and analysed even today here in Bucharest, Romania, thousands of years later. So Alexander the Great, was he the greatest general in history? His unparalleled string of victories against vastly superior forces, his revolutionary tactics, his strategic vision, and his ability to inspire unwavering loyalty in his troops certainly make a compelling case. He created an empire that stretched further than any before him and transformed the ancient world. However, his ultimate inability to secure a peaceful succession, his increasingly tyrannical tendencies, and the tragic loss of life during his conquests also form part of his complex legacy. He was undoubtedly a monumental figure, a military genius of the highest order, but his greatness, like that of any historical figure, is steeped in both unparalleled triumph and profound human cost. We've journeyed through the entire saga of Alexander the Great. What is your final, most enduring impression of him, as a general and as a historical figure? Has your understanding changed? Share your thoughts below. And if you found this deep dive impactful, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your engagement fuels these historical explorations.